Hi, everyone. I'm Donna Anderson, author of lovefraud.com and host of the True Love Fraud Stories podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Marni Feuerman, who is a licensed psychotherapist based in South Florida. She specializes in relationship issues and works with both individuals and couples. She is also author of a book called Ghosted and Breadcrumbed: Stop Falling for Unavailable Men and Get Smart About Healthy Relationships. The most recent episode of True Love Fraud Stories is about an unavailable man, or perhaps it would be better to say a man who was too available. The podcast is called He Pitted All of Us Women Against Each Other. In it, a woman whom we called Katherine tells her story of being romantically involved with a personal trainer, only to find out that he was seeing multiple other women from the gym. One of the other women, herself a therapist, said he was a covert narcissist. In this interview, Dr. Marni explains exactly what a covert narcissist is and how they behave. She also offers advice on what people should do if they believe their partner shows narcissistic traits and behaviors. Here's our conversation. When you do work with couples, what is your objective?
My objective is to help them create a healthy bond and help partners become emotionally responsive to each other. I'm also helping them understand and de-escalate a negative communication pattern or a pattern of interaction that comes up between them. Sometimes they're both triggering each other, so I'm wanting to help them understand how they're doing that. I'm also helping them learn to resource each other and the relationship to problem solve, to co-regulate, to meet each other's emotional needs, and so on.
Love Fraud primarily educates people about relationships with individuals who may have personality disorders. So, how often do couples come in for counseling and you determine that one or both partners has a serious personality disorder?
Sure. So I'll put some context around this first. So about 9 or 10% of the population meets criteria for a personality disorder. And as far as narcissistic personality disorder, around 1 to 2%, I would say, meet that criteria. So in couples therapy, it's skewed significantly higher because naturally those relationships become highly distressed. So my guesstimate would probably be upwards of around 30% would either meet full criteria or even partial criteria for a personality disorder. So many of these couples therapy cases become highly complex because of that.
So, how do you assess if one or both partners have antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, or psychopathic personality disorder?
So I conduct a very full and thorough general assessment, and that would include the couple together and also some individual sessions as well. That's part of the assessment process. And I take all the information I'm getting into consideration to determine if there is any diagnosis that would impact our chance at progress. So my assessment is very attachment based, and I approach both my assessment and my treatment that way. So I'm asking a lot of pointed questions about family of origin, their personal romantic history, and sometimes the responses can lead me to concluding early on that there's potential for a personality disorder traits or a full-blown diagnosis. So that assessment also continues throughout treatment as well as you're learning more and you're hearing more about the couple's interactions. So I'm always listening for those signs and those symptoms. And given that there's a lot of stigma around those diagnoses, I'm really careful not to jump the gun on that diagnosis. And I also know that a lot of the things that I'm seeing, a lot of those negative traits and a lot of those negative behaviors, that they're often coping strategies at one point in the person's life, usually when they're younger. So they then become highly dysfunctional, though, later on in life and certainly in the relationship. And like I said earlier about the, a skewed population coming into couples therapy, a lot of times with the personality disorder, it is the partner. Maybe the partner's healthier. Sometimes not, sometimes they've got the personality disorder as well, and we're looking at a double PD type of a case. But sometimes they are dragged in by that partner who is healthier because that they're the ones that may be motivated to figure this out, whereas the person with the personality disorder doesn't have as much insight, so they're not seeing it so much as a problem.
So, our most recent podcast was about a woman whom we called Katherine, and she was told that the man that she was involved with was a covert narcissist by another one of the victims who happened to be a psychotherapist herself. So, what is a covert narcissist?
So a covert narcissist, they're the grandiosity element of it, which is in very heavily prevalent in narcissism. There's more of a quietness about it. So they don't brag loudly, but instead that self-focus shows up in more subtle and withdrawn ways or victim-like ways. They're also very hypersensitive to criticism. So they seem like they're fragile, they're easily hurt, so there's that sort of sensitivity. They really milk the victim stance. So they kind of present themselves as misunderstood, mistreated. That's in order to gain sympathy and also to avoid accountability. So another very common sign is what I would call passive manipulation. So the control that they're having over their victim isn't overt. So they're not saying something like, you can't do this or that, but they'll use guilt or they'll sulk or they'll give a silent treatment. So they're punitive in a way to then influence or assert control other people over other people. And they don't really have true empathy. They might seem caring. They might know what to say in terms of like a caring statement, but it's on the surface. They really struggle to genuinely understand other people's needs. With narcissism, you see a lot of entitlement, but again, there's the quietness of the entitlement with covert narcissists. So they believe they deserve special treatment, but they often won't say it very loudly. And finally, they're so insecure. And so this could show up as in a volatile way, but it's things like moodiness or withdrawal or a serious amount of resentment when they feel they're slighted. Sometimes they can even become vindictive or passive aggressive. So they're doing these underhanded things to get back at their partner. And of course, it's at times really bad when the partner is standing up for themselves or they are wanting to leave the relationship or say that they're going to go. That could certainly have a spike in those types of behaviors.
How does that then differ from a regular narcissist?
Yeah, so a regular narcissist, the grandiosity is more loud. Okay, they brag, they demand attention, they want to be admired very openly. Um, their presence is more dominant. Their energy is more dominant. They're very charismatic. They're controlling in a more direct or forceful way. In conversations, there might be an aggressiveness to them. There's very obvious entitlement. They expect special treatment and they're not shy about it. When they're coming into a store and there's a line or something, they think nothing of saying, I shouldn't have to wait on this line or cutting in or that sort of thing. Their manipulation can be a bit more direct. They use charm, confrontation, intimidation, those sorts of things to get their needs met. and they will blame you. They'll blame very openly. They're very quick to criticize and use very harsh criticizing and shaming and finger pointing and those types of things. So it's much more, there's much more of a presence and an energy and a loudness to it. Whereas when I was using the word quiet, right? So think about that for a covert narcissist. The sense of superiority is more has that more of a quietness. So they do think that they're special, but they'll hide it behind being modest or self-deprecation, that sort of thing. They're very, very fragile. They're sensitive, easily hurt. They might appear introverted or a bit anxious. Their entitlement is more hidden. So they do think they deserve special treatment, but rather than overtly say something, they'll say it by being resentful or looking disappointed or down or kind of punitive. And that manipulation also is very passive too. So guilt trips, sulking, again, silent treatment. So rather than directly talk and communicate, they're going to behave in a certain way that is passive and punitive. And they will blame, but it's more subtle. Okay. So they'll play the victim. They'll say indirect or subtle comments that kind of signal that they feel like they're treated unfairly. So again, if holistically, the regular narcissist, again, it's more loud, it's more open, it's more obvious. The covert narcissist, it's more hidden and it's more quiet.
After listening to the episode with Katherine and Jay, what did you think of Jay? Do you think that the other therapist was right and he seemed to have the behaviors of a covert narcissist?
Yeah, I 100% believe based on Catherine's description. Of course, I've not evaluated Jay, but based on what I was hearing and also another therapist that kind of gave this opinion that Jay was highly disordered, and I would say most definitely a covert narcissist with extremely manipulative traits and also some sociopathic tendencies as well.
How do disordered individuals affect their romantic partners?
Well, they affect them in a lot of really bad ways, unfortunately. Um, there's a lot of unpredictability with them, particularly emotional. So partners can certainly feel like they're walking on eggshells because of the sudden mood shifts and the reactivity. There's a lot of communication breakdowns. So you're in a conversation with someone who has covert narcissism, and it feels like the conversations are circular, they're very defensive, they're very distorted. They make conflict very dysfunctional and hard to feel like you're actually resolving something. The whole intimacy is really distorted. So a partner in a relationship with this kind of person might feel like sometimes they're pulled close, other times they're pushed away. It creates a lot of confusion and instability. Ultimately, these are emotionally unavailable people. They are putting up extreme barriers to intimacy. A partner in this relationship will also notice that hyper reactivity to slights, like little perceived things. So minor issues can escalate quickly. So this way that other partner feels like they're attacked or they're blamed. Um, there's a whole skewed element of that control or dependency patterns. So it can go back and forth between a lot of dependence, dominance, and manipulation. It can feel like a roller coaster. Um, the covert narcissists, remember, they are chronically insecure. So um, they are then going to really project that onto the partner, like Katherine had, where she's questioning her reality, her needs, her self-worth. So it will leave a person really questioning themselves. These are exhausting relationships as well because of that, so at times that emotional intensity, then the person feels really burned out. they're really drained from dealing with this, as I kind of heard that too with Katherine. And like I had mentioned, it seems as if conflict is just never repaired. The covert narcissists, they never apologize, they don't take accountability, and they really can't, or often it's extremely difficult for them to fundamentally change and be consistent and be emotionally available.
You mentioned Catherine, and in this episode, she wondered if she was going crazy. So, why does this happen to people who've been involved with sociopaths or covert narcissists or other disordered individuals?
Yeah, so the relationship just creates a steady erosion of clarity, confidence, and safety. So the manipulative tactic of gaslighting, which I know Katherine mentioned, it slowly just distorted her sense of reality. So she naturally started to feel unsteady and overly responsible, unsure of her perceptions. And so it, of course, led to the feeling of going crazy. And she discussed some examples of it. She got a lot of mixed messages, so she never knew what version was the truth. It created that chronic confusion in her. The invalidation was really subtle. So instead of Jay overtly criticizing her, yelling at her or something, there would be maybe sarcasm and minimization, or saying things like, you're overreacting, or that's not true, or that didn't happen. So it just eroded her trust in her own perceptions. And again, the manipulation is really underhanded, really quiet, lies that weren't super off the charts bizarre, right? Saying something like, I have cancer. I mean, most people are going to just believe that, right? It's conceivably true. So they know to kind of lie with these conceivable types of truths. But of course, that eventually unravels. He was Jay was always portraying himself as the victim and the wounded party. Okay, so that would lead her to feel maybe sympathetic to his plight or guilty. And that's another common thing that happens in these situations, and any issue that would come up. So she would be very reasonable in going to him and trying to get these issues addressed or talk about a problem or how she felt, but it would right away get flipped, deflected, reframed, in all sorts of ways that would make her doubt her judgment, doubt her memory, doubt her sense of reality. So he was really, really cunning as far as that goes. But then the other thing that would happen is this intermittent reinforcement. So occasionally he would give her attention or maybe come off as vulnerable. But that inconsistency further adds to the instability, and that she would then strive, right, to, well, what did I do to get those good moments or get him to respond to me, again, in a fake way, right? Like he's not truly, it's not genuine. But to her, she didn't know or didn't realize that. And of course, it feels good. It's like a little bit of a dopamine hit. And we know that intermittent reinforcement is the best reinforcement schedule to learn something. So he was training her to do that. And so over time, she fundamentally started to believe that she really is the problem, and that she was really the one who maybe was, off or crazy, or her demands were unreasonable, or all of that stuff. So she's thinking that, her reactions or what she's doing is irrational, when of course that was entirely not true. That was just the house of cards that Jay built.
What happens when, like in this case, Catherine finally learned the truth that everything Jay had said to her was a lie? I mean, the cancer was a lie, his other physical problems was a lie, and he was cheating with all these people. So what is the effect of someone when they find out that all these things that they had believed before turns out to be totally false?
Yeah, it is very traumatizing. It's very shocking. Those are very natural responses. Um, I think there has to be some care and concern around what you're then going to do. So sometimes confrontation isn't always the best thing. Again, number one, I want people to think about their safety. And that includes, obviously physical safety, but emotional safety. And so they might need help and guidance from somebody or from a therapist um, to decide with clarity and with groundedness and presence of mind and all of that, how they want to handle it. And, every situation is different, right? It's different if, let's say, Katherine married this person and or had kids with this person, or they were living together, those sorts of things. That could be different than if you're not married, if you're not living in the same household. So you want to decide how much your safety would be compromised. And so I would definitely encourage somebody to get help with this sort of thing and also know that your array of emotions that you're going to feel when you start piecing this together and figuring this out is very normal. It's normal to be shocked and to be sad and to sometimes even feel, which I heard a little bit of this, like people feel like, oh my gosh, I was stupid. How could I do this? So they're also punishing themselves then at that point because of what they allowed themselves to do. So I would say be kind and compassionate to yourself because these people are really, really good at what they do. They're excellent at manipulation. They know how to use emotional intelligence even to their advantage. And a lot of very intelligent women get fooled by this stuff.
If someone realizes that their romantic partner may have a manipulative personality disorder, what should they do?
I think you have to validate the reality of that, and it's hard to do when you're wrapped up into it. And I think that's the kind of thing that therapy is really good for. And if you can bring that partner in, if they're willing to go with you, you can do that. If they're not willing, then do it yourself. You need an outside person to help you with this and to help you understand why and how you got involved, um, why you might have stayed, what unconscious mechanisms are at play in your own self, and most importantly, how to heal and move forward. And it's important to have the support while you do that.
What one or two insights do people who suspect that their partners are disordered really need to understand?
Sure. So people with these disorder traits, they can come off as warm or loving, apologetic in short bursts. But look at the overarching patterns here. All right. There's a pattern of withdrawal, manipulation, emotional distortion, lack of reciprocity. So look at the whole story, the big picture, and also focus on that relational pattern as a whole, as opposed to just those occasional good moments, those little breadcrumbs that you're getting. So that will help lift that veil of confusion and help you see what's happening and become clearer as to what to do about it.
How do you think people should go about recovery after they've escaped an involvement with a disordered individual?
Well, like what you're doing, Donna, there's a lot of great resources out there. So I would say look for those highly reputable resources. There's self-help books, there's e-courses, and certainly therapy, but that therapist should have some training in attachment theory, relational systems, and trauma because it's likely that somebody that's been in a relationship like this has experienced trauma from being in this. There's also what's called CODA meetings, CODA, codependent anonymous meetings, because many women prone to becoming victims of these types of people, they tend to be naturally over functioning and they're highly empathetic people. And so they can get easily drawn into this. And so it's also good to have that group support so you don't feel like you're alone and you're in the same boat with a lot of other people and particularly women, like I said, that have experienced this. And so those sorts of things I think could really be helpful as in terms of recovering.
That's the end of my questions about the story. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Um, No, I think that listening to these stories, I think is so helpful because they're so highly relatable for other people who've been in these circumstances, and that we have a lot of good help out there now. We've become savvier about what's happening and what's going on, and there's some more science about what causes this, how people get involved in these situations and what could be really helpful to people who are unfortunate victims of others who just treat them terribly.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Marni. This was fabulous and great information.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a pleasure to talk about this with you.
I'm Donna Anderson, and this is True Love Fraud Stories. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Dr. Marni Feuerman. For information about her practice, please visit thetalkingsolution.com. She also offers free resources on her other website, drmarnionline.com. You'll find links on the page about this episode on podcasts.lovefraud.com. True Love Fraud Stories is produced by lovefraud.com. Engineering is by Terry Kelly. To learn how to recognize and recover from everyday sociopaths, visit lovefraud.com. You'll find articles, books, and webinars. For practical advice on dealing with your situation, reach out to me. I also offer EFT tapping and Reiki so you can put down the emotional burden, feel better, and move forward. Book your session today at lovefraud.com/talk to Donna. Also, I invite you to my Love Fraud Live YouTube show. I talk about how to spot, escape, and recover from sociopaths. And then I answer your questions. It streams live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I look forward to seeing you there.